President Trump traveled to Indiana this week to unveil a new Republican tax reform plan. But at this point, the plan is only a framework. So we traveled to Aston, Pennsylvania with Speaker Paul Ryan to tour a manufacturing plant and get more details.
Mr. Speaker, we are at Pennsylvania Machine Works. I'm going to ask you a question. A worker here asked you, how are these tax cuts going to help the blue-collar worker? What are they going to take home in their pocket?
Well, first of all, the whole purpose of this is to get a middle-class tax cut, to help the people who are working paycheck to paycheck, keep more of their own hard-earned dollars. They haven't had a break in a long time. Our economy's been growing between 1% and 2% for a long time. We haven't had 3% growth in about a decade, and that means workers are struggling. So, number one, a middle-class tax cut to help those families keep more of what they earn. But number two, this business is a perfect example of how we need to help get tax reform to get the tax rates down on these businesses so they can stay competitive and keep hiring people.
But I'm a blue-collar worker. What's my paycheck going to look like? What am I taking home? What are you promising?
Well,
we're promising anything? Do I know some money's coming to me?
You know some money's coming to you. We're going to double that standard deduction. We're going to make it so he can fill out his taxes on a postcard. We're going to lower his taxes. That's really important. So he has more take-home pay. But there's another component to this is, look at this machine shop. This business pays about a 40% tax rate, but it competes with companies all around the world who pay on average 22.5% on their taxes. So we're going to lower the taxes on this business so it's globally competitive, so it can compete with this foreign competition. And then we're going to give this business an ability to write off the investments that they make in this business to buy more machines, to hire more workers, to raise wages. That, to us, is really important.
I want to get back to the businesses in a second because there's obviously some debate about the effective rate they pay, but let's just stick to the worker for a minute. Can you guarantee that every middle-class person will get a tax cut once this becomes a bill and then that passes?
That's the purpose of doing this. The purpose of this is to get a middle-class tax cut.
So is that a guarantee?
Well, I don't know every single person's little small problem or issue.
But it'll be minimal if nobody gets, if I'm a middle-class tax.
The entire purpose of this is to lower middle-class taxes. So yes, people are going to get tax cuts. How big are those tax cuts? That depends on the individual. Do you have kids? Because they're going to be a bigger child tax credit. Are you married? You're going to have zero marriage penalty.
Well, that's the worry because
those are the kinds of things that will determine based on how low people's taxes go, because we want pro-family tax code to make it easier for people to get married, to raise kids, to work.
You mentioned you're doubling the standard deduction, but you're also getting rid of some exemptions, and also the child tax credit is still up in the air. Those numbers haven't been figured out yet.
That's right.
So when the math gets worked out,
but we don't know how much it's going to go up.
But when the math gets worked out, there may be some families who do see their taxes increase, and I'm saying it as an objective for the bill as it goes through its process. Right. Will you work to squeeze that number to as low as possible?
That's exactly right. So the objective is to lower taxes for middle-class taxpayers.
Let me ask you about something you've wanted to do in the past you're not doing here, which is expanding the earned income tax credit for childless filers. It's a way to help people who are at the real bottom end, the people who've seen this inequality really face-to-face. Why is this not in?
Yeah, well, we're still looking at, we're keeping the EITC, of course, because we think it is actually pretty effective, but that's one of the things the committee is still looking at.
So it might happen.
So there's, within the framework of this bill, are many other decisions that have to be made, because the framework of this, and the reason we did it this way, is unlike healthcare. We wanted to make sure that everyone was on the same page with respect to the House and the Senate and the White House. Now, working within that framework, we're going to be targeting these things so that we can make sure that middle-class taxpayers get a break. And one of the things that we think helps move people into work is the EITC. So we want more work incentives, and EITC reform is clearly something we're going to be looking at.
You could expand it. Let me ask you this then. Another thing that maybe will be in it coming in the process. The president had wanted to get rid of carried interest, the so-called carried interest loophole.
That's something that the committee is going to make a decision on. What I made a decision.
Why shouldn't it be a kind of a cinch?
No, it should be something that the tax writing committees who are in charge of writing tax legislation will be deciding and working on. That is one of the issues they're clearly looking into. The point I'm trying to make here is I like going through what we call the regular order process.
But you're pitching this as a middle-class tax cut, and you say every child in America should have an opportunity in this country, and that's been part of the American dream. But there are specifics in this. You're getting rid of the estate tax. The earned income tax credit is not being expanded. It might be in the future. The carried interest loophole is still in there. If I'm looking at this and I'm a middle-class person, I'm thinking the estate tax people are taken care of. The alternative minimum tax, which will help the wealthy, that's getting taken care of. But the things that will help me, those are till later.
Can I get through that? We're going to double your standard deduction so you can file your taxes on a postcard. We're going to take people who are in the 10% bracket and put a lot of that money in a 0% tax bracket. We're taking the 15% bracket down to 12%. We're going to get rid of the marriage penalty. We're going to increase the child tax credit. We're going to maintain critical things like incentives for home buying, charitable giving,
but you know, when people
education
look at this,
savings,
they'll see,
retirement savings.
But when people,
those are all, just give me,
yeah.
those are all middle-class tax things. The purpose of this is to help people who are living by a paycheck keep more of their own hard-earned money, but also get more jobs, a faster growing economy.
Let me ask you about the theory behind the lowering of the corporate tax rate. If the corporate tax rate goes down, how do you know a company is going to put it back into wages? A lot of money from companies has gone to shareholders. Most sat on the sidelines.
Most studies show that when you lower that the tax on businesses is taken out of wages. So the point is,
actually, isn't there quite a lot of debate about that?
Let me say it this way. Should we be taxing American businesses at much higher tax rates than our foreign competitors are taxing theirs? This business is taxed as high as 40+%, and their competitors are taxed on average 22.5%. How does that help this business in global competition?
I guess isn't the debate that effectively the rate's actually quite lower than 40, and also I guess the question
that's
is
not actually always the case. Well, the point is we know we're taxing our businesses at much higher tax rates than our foreign competitors are taxing theirs. And here's the point, John. Businesses are leaving America. The current tax code discourages making things in America. The current tax code says if you're good enough to be big enough to make money overseas, you can't even bring it back because of our tax laws.
You have spent your life thinking about tax reform. The other thing you've thought about is fiscal issues. Mm-hmm. Will this tax plan increase the debt?
It's going to be deficit neutral. That's the budget rules we use, which is called the Byrd Rule.
Yeah.
So this will have to be a deficit neutral tax bill. But we do fundamentally believe that this tax code and this tax reform will give us faster economic growth. Faster economic growth helps raise the economy, which raises revenues, and that helps us tackle the deficit. There's two things we got to do to get rid of this debt. Deal with entitlements. That's why we're frustrated healthcare reform hasn't passed the Senate yet. Deal with runaway spending, but also grow the economy. This helps grow the economy. So if you're asking me whether it's going to be deficit neutral tax reform, that's what it has to be for us to be able to pass the bill.
After 10 years, so it will. So, but what about the debt in terms of the additional money to the debt from this? Not deficit year to year, but overall.
If this results in giving us a faster economic growth, that will help us reduce our debt.
What a lot of people who've known you for a long time and have worked on these issues, when they hear you say, if this gives us growth, they say he's gone to the dark side.
I think it's the bright side, which is economic growth.
Sure, but they say the growth of the kind that we'll need to fund this is just beyond the real reality.
Two things. You got to have tax reform to get faster economic growth. Faster economic growth is necessary for us to get our debt under control. But you also have to reform entitlement programs.
Could you tie entitlement reform to this, as some in the Freedom Caucus want?
You could, but I think we would kill tax reform if we did, because let me just show you one piece of evidence. The Senate can't get health care out of the Senate. So if we put something that has been proven to fail in the Senate to tax reform, we would kill tax reform. So why would we do that?
Well, that leads us to politics. In the Affordable Care Act, it didn't make it through in the Senate. Why is it going to make it through in the Senate this time?
You talking about tax reform? Mm-hmm. I think it will make it through for a few reasons. Number one, we did this on the front end. We negotiated a framework so that we all agree what this needs to look like at the front end. In healthcare, what we did was we passed a bill in the House, and then the Senate looked at our bill and decided to go a different direction, and here we are. We have more consensus on tax reform as Republicans, and we have less consensus on healthcare reform as Republicans.
I don't hear you talking about working with Democrats on this.
We talk to Democrats all the time, actually.
But do you work with them on this?
We do work with Democrats, but we're not going to give Chuck Schumer the ability to filibuster this bill because we think that would derail tax reform. Do we want Democrat involvement? Absolutely. Did the president have Democrats in the Ways and Means Committee in the White House 2 days ago? Yes.
Do you worry the president will go off and work with the Democrats?
I think he should work with Democrats.
On tax reform?
Well, I don't think you're going, if not on a filibuster, I think it would be a big mistake if we didn't use reconciliation because we're basically dooming tax reform. But do we want Democrats to work with us on this? Of course we do. He had Joe Donnelly on the plane yesterday going to Indiana, which, by the way, I really fundamentally believe some of these Democrats from some of these states are going to vote for this. Look, Indiana, #1 state for manufacturing. This tax reform so much helps these kinds of manufacturers. So I think when people look at their constituents, tax breaks for middle-class families, making manufacturing more competitive, helping businesses stay in America, creating more jobs and faster economic growth, I got to think that some Democrats are going to listen not to the party leaders, but to their constituents, and I think some of them are going to vote for this.
And we'll be back in 1 minute with more from House Speaker Paul Ryan. We also spoke to Speaker Ryan about the topic of race in America.
A year ago, we talked about race relations in the country, and you said you hoped then candidate Trump would be inclusive. You said he's new at this. It's been a year now. How would you rate his ability to bring this country together, which has a clearly an
well,
issue with
I mean,
race.
like I said on the Charlottesville thing, there were like 3 comments. One of them was great. 4 comments, I think. 2 good, 2 bad. You know, I think, like you say, like I said before, he's learning. I know his heart's in the right place.
How do you know that?
I've had some candid conversations with him about this, especially during that time. I've had some very candid conversations, and so I do really believe his heart's in the right place. I think what matters is that we have to show people that we are an inclusive society, that we want everyone to succeed. And I think there's more that all of us as leaders have got to do to be inclusive with people and make people feel like they're included in society. And I think we got a long ways to go, just as a society and a country, for that.
Here's the criticism, you know it, with respect to the NFL. The president makes the case for those who see the kneeling at football games as an act of disrespect, and he argues about patriotism. He never mentions the reason that the players, some have chosen to kneel, and what that's about.
Yeah.
Should that be addressed by a national leader? Isn't that part of the conversation?
Well, there has been conversations. We've had these police shootings, Ferguson. That has been a national conversation. No 2 ways about it. We do hearings on this. I set up a task force last year after the police shootings, bipartisan task force.
But I mean, as a president,
So,
he's spending time on one side of the argument.
Yeah, but
Suggests, in fact, holding the opposite view and being concerned as an African American.
But I do think he's got a point, which is what I think a lot of people who are protesting on that don't necessarily see is that other people see it as disrespecting the country, what it stands for, the flag, and the people who died to protect it. So I think clearly people have a right to express themselves in the First Amendment however they want to. But what so many Americans, I see this at home, see is you're disrespecting the idea of America, that we want to make this free country a more perfect union and that people died and fought and survived to protect it. So they don't see the point that they're trying to make.
All right, Mr. Speaker, thanks so much for being with us.
Hey, you bet. Thanks, John.